right, we're back. Mondays, we're doing the Hans Comyn thing. Last week we talked about being an elder, how to be an elder, who to be an elder for, the challenge it is to become an elder, especially this day and age. We also talked about
why to be an elder, the benefits.
Yes. And we talked about 10 ways or 10 characteristics, 10 ways that you could show up as an elder. And in the coming weeks, what we want to do is go into each one and explore each of the topics, each of those 10, maybe 11, maybe 12, maybe 13 topics. And the first one, and we'll talk about this today, is so how to be an elder, be an ancestor worth coming from. Be an ancestor worth coming from. What does that mean, Michael Skye? What does that mean to you?
I am not sure where I heard this phrase for the first time. It might have been from Stephen Jenkins, worth a Google search for those of you who don't know who he is. He put out a documentary called Grief Walker, and he does grief work, basically. And he has spent many, many hours with people about ready to die, you know. And he talks about, their experience, and so many people, he would say, are qualified not as elders, only as olders, you know. You got older and you basically just lived for yourself, lived a comfortable life. And I believe it was him I heard the phrase, be an ancestor worth coming from. And there's a quality of honor even in that calling. It's something like leaving a legacy. You know, a lot of men, when they get maybe past 40 or so, start thinking more about what legacy am I going to leave behind. And I like this more than leaving a legacy, because leaving a legacy is about you, you know. It's about how you'll be remembered. And this is similar, but I think it places more emphasis on your future generations and not yourself, you know. Like thinking about them in the future, will they have you to look up to and to want to be like? So what makes you an ancestor worth coming from?
What was his name?
Stephen Jenkins.
Stephen Jenkins. Okay.
Yes. And the documentary was called Grief Walker. Be an ancestor worth coming from. So, you know, an ancestor I look back to in my past, who I revere. His name was Abraham Hunsaker. And there's several there's several stories of epic, heroic journeys he went on, treks he made, things he did, taking his country into the wilderness, into Indian territory to settle in Utah.
Country.
Sorry?
You said taking his
family across the country, into the Wild West to settle in a new land. Also, several generations before him, the ancestors who first crossed the Atlantic to make a new home in the New World. And these are things that changed. Like, it changes where I grew up, where I was born. It kind of changes everything. It gave all of their future generations, let's say, a better place to live, a better place to grow up in. And I think a mark of being an ancestor worth coming from is making some kind of epic kind of sacrifice for your future generations. Like, it's not all about you. It's, you really did work with them in your heart to take care of those future generations.
We're having trouble connecting here. But do you revere him because of what he accomplished? Do you revere him because of what he accomplished, or because you could see the sacrifice he made?
Both. Both are, I think both are important, you know, the victory as well as the sacrifice. I mean, you could speak in a certain way about an ancestor who won a battle on the battlefield, right? And he was there, you know, and they were victorious. But you could also speak about him epically if he gave up his life on the battlefield, you know, defending his homeland, protecting his family from the invaders. And he sacrificed his life, right? There's more of a sense of pride in the victory. There's more of a sense of honor in the sacrifice. And
so what was his sacrifice of Abraham Hunsaker?
well, and it doesn't have to be just a sacrifice either for the honor, but there's basically a stand that they make, right?
Uh-huh.
Something they face and a stand that they make. And yeah, crossing the Wild West on foot and with covered wagon, you know, with your family and the trials and tribulations of that, and the conflicts with the Native Americans, and the walking across, you know, just surviving through these winters in the northern American territories with your family. And you know, they were going on a trek to find a new homeland. You know, and he's leading his family there, leading his children. He's the one, you know, like they're all depending on him. He also joined the Mormon battalion, and I think this is the first, perhaps only other real army in America, you know, in the United States, besides the United States military. The Mormons actually formed their own army back in the day, and he was called to join that, and he joined that, and they walked on foot from, I don't know if it was from Utah or from like back in Illinois, all the way to the coast, the Pacific coast. They were there at the start of the gold rush, and then I believe they walked all the way back, and it was something like the longest military march ever in American history. And so there's kind of a victory, right? There's the great things that they accomplished, and then there's also the sacrifices they made. He also served a mission. I think he went back to Europe. May have been where he found his first wife. I'm not sure. He ended up having 52 kids, and 5 wives, and there are stories of him.
Is that a sacrifice, Michael Skye, to have 5 wives?
It is,
or is
man.
that something that gives you pride?
Imagine the freedom he gave up. Just imagine, Hans. Can you imagine? Yeah. The peace. Imagine the peace he sacrificed to have 5 wives. But there's a part of Utah that he settled that's now named after him, and that's still where, you know, many of us come from. That's where my grandfather comes from. That's near where my dad grew up, and it's where I ended up graduating high school. So that's, you know, that's one thing, you know. How much are we thinking about our future generations? You know, how much what we're doing now is in the spirit of living a life that will inspire those future young men to want to be like us, and take on epic challenges and make epic sacrifices for their future generations.
Yes.
Someone who stands out to me over the recent several years, 5 or 6 years or so, is Jordan Peterson. He's inspired many a man, actually, and I was watching a video of him yesterday, and he was being interviewed. It was kind of a hostile interview, and the woman was asking him, like, how much responsibility do you take for people who might interpret your words or your work in a bad way, you know? And she was using the example of how Hitler and the Nazis interpreted Nietzsche's work in a way that he didn't intend. And so she's kind of using this real dark example, like there are men or the alt-right or whatever who might interpret Jordan Peterson's stuff in a really bad way, and his response was something like, as much responsibility as I possibly can. Like, that's how much responsibility I take. And he talks about carrying the heaviest load that you can.
Yes.
And there's a lot of honor in that, you know. I find it very inspiring, you know, to take on the heaviest load that you can. And you can look at him and what he's faced in his journey, and that's inspiring to men, you know, because what is he standing for, and who is he standing for? And there's a lot of men out there and young men who feel like he's standing up for me, you know, and the thousands, millions of other men, but not just that, like, he's standing for Western civilization. He's standing that we have free speech. He's standing for freedom itself. He's, you know, you could go on and on about what you could see he's standing for. But although he is also making a lot of money and becoming quite successful doing what he's doing, it's hard to look at him and say, oh, he's all about himself, you know. So he's making the kind of sacrifices that make other men want to make sacrifices. He's carrying the kind of load that make other men want to pick up and carry the load for their people. And I think that's one key aspect of being an ancestor worth coming from.
So would that aspect then be you asking yourself, how can I be a great ancestor? Or how can I be an ancestor worth coming from? Like, to ask yourself that question instead of asking, how can I get more happiness or more wealth, or, you know, to ask, how can I be an ancestor worth coming from?
Yeah, and even more specifically in this way, what burden can I carry? What load can I carry that will inspire my future generations, the young men around me, to also want to carry a heavy load for their people? You know, to want to set that example. So there are some other things as well that I think we can look at. I think one thing we can say is it's more of a what not to do, and it's about being a man worthy of respect. And being a man worthy of respect to me means you don't let people disrespect you, right? So you don't let people push you around. You don't let people soil your name. You don't let people talk bad about your people. And this is very much of a defensive thing, you know, very much a thing of holding the line.
Hold the line.
Yes. Not allowing the shaming and humiliation of yourself or your people. So this is another thing you can stand up for in the face of, right? I know as a boy, you know, I watched the interactions, I watched the conflicts between my mom and my dad, and there were ways that I didn't want to be like my father. And I wanted my father to stand up for himself more. And some of the ways in which he didn't led me not to identify with him as much, you know, led me want to take a different path more. And I think every boy looks up to his father, looks up to his uncles, looks up to the men that are like the men in his world, and he wants them to stand up. You know, he wants them to not take shit. He doesn't want them to cower. He doesn't want them to compromise in the face of pressure, in the face of a woman who's shaming him, in the face of a boss who's asking things of him that are below his dignity. And so I would say another big aspect of this is being a warrior when it comes to no compromise and allowing no disrespect for yourself and your people.
So we got asking the question, so how to be an ancestor worth coming from? Well, first of all, ask the question to yourself. How can I be an ancestor worth coming from? Then we talked about how big of a burden can you carry as an inspiration also.
Or a load.
A load.
By the way, this is worth pointing out that, I mean, the word burden, it just sounds like suffering. But what may not be so obvious is that there's great honor in carrying the heavy load. There can be great honor, and physical pain does not equal suffering. And I would say, like, suffering is on one side, honor is on the other. So you can carry the heavy load to get honor, or you can carry the heavy load and be suffering with the heavy load. But so carrying the heavy load for your people does not mean suffering. And the other question, right, could be how can I guard the respect of me and my people? How can I not allow people to disrespect me and my people? This seems less important in the free world, so to speak, where we believe in free speech. But the more that times get tough, or the more you live in a tribal society, it's even more important to have self-respect and to have people respect your family. Yes. You know, a big part of, like, freedom, American freedom anyway, is I'll do whatever I want. I don't care what kind of name it gives my family. I don't care what kind of, you know, how people see me. I'm just going to do it anyway.
I wonder where I heard that.
But if you're taking into account your future generations, you know, all your relations, you might do some things differently. Another thing, Hans, I think another great thing is, what great victory or victories could you attain that could give a name to your family, you know, that could make your future sons and grandsons proud, you know? My son wore, you know, my grandfather won the Tour de France. I mean, like, how beautiful would that be, right?
Thinking of Troy as he goes into battle, you know, he says, there's this boy who asks, why do you do this? And he says something like, well, you'll never be remembered. He says to the little boy,
Count the full thing.
Oh, I'm making it short because I forgot the concrete thing, but it's Achilles who speaks. You know that going into battle right now is really making sure you live forever. You know. And,
Yes.
Sacrificing his life to become an ancestor. Where
Yeah.
they're coming from.
So we kind of have three things here. One is honor, two is respect, and the third is pride. For honor, you have the risks that you take, the sacrifices you take, the stands that you make. For respect, you have the ways that you defend. You don't let people shame you and your people, and you stand up to defend and protect that. And the third is pride, and this has to do with victories and achievements. That are going to inspire your future generations.
Do you rate these as one is higher than the other?
I think that honor is the most important.
Uh-huh.
I think
So-
honor is the most important.
So the sacrifice would be the most important.
It doesn't need to be the sacrifice, but again, the stand that you make, right?
But that's way less, at least in society. Remember, because that's why I was pushing to ask you, what do you see Abraham Handsaker was sacrificing, and it's way harder to name it than the victories he got, for which you get pride and not so much honor. So imagine all those people who sacrificed, and didn't get the victories, and they're not remembered. So I think that's very interesting, because what I'm hearing is, when I ask you about the sacrifice he made, it's almost like an assumption or a thinking exercise of you, and not you. We don't really know what people are sacrificing. So,
Well, again, honor's not just quote unquote sacrifice. You can definitely look at his life and talk about the epic things that he faced. There's a story that's often told about him losing a son. Lost a son to the Indians, and then went back looking for him for, I don't know, days, weeks, months, years, mourning the loss of his son. And then they also adopted a Native American boy. So his son was killed by the Native Americans, and he also adopted a Native American boy. So I think that, and even in the victories, there's honor in the victories, because there's a lot you have to face, right? There's stands you have to make to get the victory. So kind of honor underlies it all. There's a stand you have to make to stand up for respect and self-respect. There's things you have to face and a stand you have to make. So for me, honor is kind of, it's foundational to all of those, to those three things. And another thing we have as far as being an elder, which we'll talk about possibly tomorrow or in the coming days, is telling the stories to honor your ancestors. Telling the stories of honor, passing on these stories is because the overarching thing here is to be the elder, not just to be the ancestor worth coming from, right? But to be the elder.
So, but that would be a next topic, right? That would be the second one that we listed. So today,
I think, I'm exploring, are there more than these things? We're just doing this conversation off the top of our head, but I think also of my grandfather on my mom's side. One thing I remember about him is that, and you could say it was a victory, but it was something he did for the whole family. And you could call it a sacrifice, you could call it a victory. maybe there's another category for this, but he flew the entire family to Mexico for a family reunion. So this is children, their spouses, and their children, and him and his wife, a very large extended Mormon family, flew everyone to Mexico, paid for everyone's return flights, paid for everyone's room and board there, and made this like lasting memory happen for the family. So this is maybe this is a gift. Maybe we could call this a gift. Maybe this is another category here. There's honor in it as well. It's a gift that he gave to the family. Or, yeah.
I'm looking at how to be an ancestor worth coming from, and I hear just integrating. I hear asking the question. I hear wondering what load you can carry. I'm hearing be a man worthy of respect. I hear getting great victories.
Not just being a man worthy of respect, but actually defending the respect for yourself and your people.
Defending the respect for yourself and your people. And I hear epic victories. Always to be an ancestor worth coming from.
And then what you give.
What you give.
The giving that you can give to your people.
It's 5 good explorations, 5 great ways that you can explore being an ancestor worth coming from, as part of how to be an elder.
Yes.
And the last thing you said was, tell the stories. Yes.
I'm just thinking of, well, telling the stories. I think is maybe in a different category.
Yes.
Right? But another one might just be living the way you live your life as an example for your future generations. So I think you can live a very humble life, a humble life, like really conscious life, taking care of you and yours, making that stand every day to be a great man and to care for your people. And it's not like one epic thing, right? It's not like one epic victory or one great sacrifice or something like this. But it is, I think that is a very notable, remarkable thing, that would inspire sons and grandsons and so on.
Live as an example for the next generations.
Yes, how you live day to day.
Yes, I like that.
There's Stephen Jenkins also talks about be an example in how you die, like, is death something that, you've just not faced all your life, and then in your last moments you're afraid and you're suffering and you are miserable? Like he talks about he talks about, I'd really like to explore this more and go back into what he talks about, because I feel there's something really powerful there,
Derrida wrote about the art of disappearing.
Be an example, not just in how you live, but in how you die. And you can think of the samurai, for example, right? They didn't just like live with honor; they died with honor. And there's something really powerful in that.
Well, death was one of the ways that they could reclaim their honor, even if they haven't been honorable their whole life. In the way they died, say seppuku, they could reclaim their honor.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
You could be living badly your whole life and then still reclaim your honor.
Warriors from different traditions talk about an honorable death, you know, wanting an honorable death. And yes, there we have it, Hans.
You'll have to list those 5-6 ways of being a great, being an ancestor worth coming from, as one of the ways to be an elder.
This is very much an exploration for us, you know. This is at one of my events back in 2007. There's a man who had spent a lot of time with like Native American peoples, and he told me one time he was at a Sundance or something with with Native Americans that they do every year, and there's a lot of white people that go and participate in the Native American traditions. And he was talking to a Native American elder, and he's like, "Why don't you white men go make your own traditions? You know, your own traditions of honor and your whatever." And this man attended my event, and he was like, you know, he was saying like, "Yeah, this is a way of doing it. Let's do it. You know, let's create our own tradition."
A way of creating it.
And this is another thing, actually. I think, Hans, creating traditions for your people. This would be a great legacy to leave, a great gift to leave behind for your people. If your people have lost those traditions, you know, of honor, of brotherhood, of elderhood, you could be the one to restore that lineage, to restore those traditions.
I want you to send me that, and I want to list it, explore it. Tomorrow, what are we talking about tomorrow?
I have someone transcribing them, by the way.
Okay, good. Tomorrow we will talk about, what was the second one?
I'll have to...
Was it telling stories? Honor thy elders.
Honor thy elders.
Reconnect the lineage of honor and tell the stories.
Yes, yes.
So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Cool?
Yes.
See you again at 8:30 Medellín time.